Hello friends, this is Christopher Davis-Shannon and welcome to the second installment of the wonderful World of Clawhammer Ukulele. If you missed last week's lesson, I will link to it here as we'll be building upon those concepts this week. This week we're going to be tackling how to add chords and rhythm to a basic clawhammer arrangement. Now, while you can play a host of different rhythms in clawhammer style, the foundation that most of it is built off of is what we call the bum ditty rhythm. And it's called that because, well, that's what it sounds like. Bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty. Or if you want to think about it rhythmically, we have 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. So if we think about our motion that we were doing last week, we were always coming down. That's our bum right here, is the melody note that we were playing last week. Now our two short notes are going to be, for our purposes at the moment, another of those melody notes. We'll play 2 in a row, then followed by the thumb. Remember that the thumb was always to come to rest on the G string when you were not using it, because we're going to use that. So let's try this together. We're going to put down a C major chord, and we're going to do 2 strikes on the melody string, and then up with the thumb. Now remember, we're not plucking with the thumb like this. As our hand comes up to reset for our next stroke, it's going to just catch the G string and play it. So let's try that together. Just our C major chord with just the A string at the moment, and then we'll move it. And this gets us our basic bum ditty rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's move down to the E string. C string. Good. Up to the E string. A string. Good, and this is something to practice. Again, isolating these individual strings, but now adding in our bum ditty rhythm with the thumb in here. Now let's go back to our C major scale that we played last week and do this over top of a bum ditty rhythm. So we'll actually be doing 2 of each melody note. Let me just play the first couple measures of this for you before we give it a try together. So it'll sound like this. Let's try that up and down together. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once we feel comfortable with our rhythm, then it's time to start to add in chords. And know that what we just did, you can kind of stop there. In some clawhammer styles, we don't use the chords themselves. We play nearly all individual notes. But we're going to add in chords here utilizing what's called the brush stroke to get them out. So let's just put down a C major chord. And we're going to change our pattern now. The rhythm is exactly the same, but we're going to have our melody note, and then we're going to play what's called a brush stroke, or we're just going to play our bottom 3 strings. All of your fingernails can hit them, 2 can hit them, 1 can hit them. It doesn't matter too much. But remember that we're brushing across the strings. It's not really a strum per se. It's just with the motion, and see that the thumb is still coming to rest on the G because we're going to need that. So this is what it's going to sound like, our bum ditty rhythm with a brush strum thrown in here. So we get Let's try that together on a C major chord, and we'll move that melody note to different strings as we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Note, brush, strum, note, brush, strum, note, brush, strum, note. E string. C string. Good. Now let's talk about chords for a moment before we try to put this all together. As I had mentioned in the last lesson on this, our chords are going to be just a little bit different than normal because in essence, the G string doesn't exist anymore. It's just a drone. So any note that we would typically have on there will no longer happen. And we're going to be playing just in the key of C, so we really only need 2.5 chords. So our first one is going to be C. Nothing needs to change here. There's nothing on the G string. Now the issue is, if you remember when we were playing our melody last week, all of our melody Gs need to be here. So if we're going to play a chord around that, we're actually going to play what's called a C5 chord. Open, open, 3, 3. We could alternatively play a bar chord like this, but who wants that? Keeping everything down low, nice and easy. So we'll have a C5 in some of our patterns if the G is being utilized as a melody. And then we have a G7th. Just normal. We need to do nothing to this. And then our 4 chord, which we don't actually use in the song that we're working on, but is important to know, is an F major chord. Now, if we think of F, we can't have this note. We need a high G. So we're actually going to play an F chord. It's just a 1-finger chord. Open, open, 1, open. An F add 9, but really, it's just an F major chord with a G drone against it. So what we're going to try now is a little bit of an exercise, going up the C major scale, but using the appropriate chord as we go throughout. Let's give it a shot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's time to take our melody for a Tisket, a Tasket from last week and put some chords and rhythm to it now. So the first time that we go through this, we're going to use our bum ditty rhythm and the brush stroke, and we're going to play this as if we were singing it and accompanying ourselves by not isolating all of the melody notes. And the second time, we'll play the melody with the bum ditty in here, which will necessitate us not using the brush stroke all the time. So we'll be starting out on a C5 chord. And everything that we do in this first line is exactly the same. So our bum ditty rhythm is throughout. So we're going to hit our G on the 3rd fret twice, and then brush thumb. And then lift up the ring finger so we have an open E, brush thumb. So our first measure and the subsequent 3 measures sound like this. Going back and forth between C5 and C. Let's try that together, and we're coming in on beat 4, so I'll give you 3 beats. 1, 2, 3. Good, and then for G7th, we're really going to do the same thing. We're just going to have one single pattern for those 3 measures. We put down our G7th chord, and we're just going to hit the E string, brush thumb, and then the C string, brush thumb. We don't need to move anything on the left hand, so it'll sound like this. And back to C. All right, so let's try that whole first pattern together. 1, 2, 3. So now we need to add the rest of the melody in, and this is going to leave us without a few of the brush strokes because some of our melody notes come on beat 2 and beat 4 where we would brush that chord. So we're going to play individual notes at times with our bum ditty rhythm as we did in the beginning, but we're going to leave out a few of the chords. So the beginning starts the same. We start on our C5 chord, C, but then we have an A up here. So we're going to do our bum ditty off the A and then G string. So our first measure sounds like this. Back to C5. And the second measure, instead of going up to A, our passing note here is an F on the 1st fret. Now we're going to leave out in our next measure our brush strums entirely over top of this C chord. So here's our first 4 measures of the melody. So that's all over top of a C chord, and notice that even the left-hand work is a little bit easier than it was before if we have all of the chords in here, but now we're hearing the full melody. Now over top of the G7th chord, our melody is... As we're playing that, we play on nearly every beat, which means we're pretty much just going to leave out the brush strums so that we can have that second articulated note. So we hear... Notice in that last bit when we walk down G, F, E, D, E, C, that we're doing all of our bum ditties, but none of the brushes there. So let's try this little bit of the melody with our bum ditty rhythm and a few brush strokes together. 1, 2, 3. I hope you all have enjoyed this lesson, getting a little bit more comfortable with this style of playing. If you'd like to have a PDF download to go along with this with all the exercises that we've done here, as well as the accompaniment and the melody versions of this in Clawhammer, join me over on Patreon or through my website at the 𝐤𝐨𝐬𝐵𝐿𝐿E Club. I'll see you all next week.